What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a couple of weeks since I've had a chance to work on the Rabbit. Last weekend I was down at Pocono Raceway with my boys Nick and Felipe for the Impact BMW show. Saturday was a lot of fun, that was just more of a car show. Sunday was some roll racing. I actually did a video on that, so if you haven't checked that out already, go back and check that out. It was pretty fun to see Felipe's TTRS stacking up against some competition on the drag strip. That car's got 760 horsepower when it runs on ethanol, and you may have seen if you follow me on social media that I have my hand in that car quite a lot. So that was fun to see it out on track and really see what it's got. And you'll see behind me, something is missing from my garage. The GTI is down at Nick's house, and him and Felipe are giving the paint some love that it deserves. It's kind of getting a little tired. It really needs a nice compound polish and a ceramic coat. And that is in preparation for the Eurobuilt car show that's coming up this weekend in central Vermont. So yeah, back on with the Rabbit today. You will have seen in the last episode, we fixed a couple of things. Managed to fix the wiring, managed to do a compression test, that all checked out as well. And then I was still having that one issue inside on the dash with the temperature gauge. And there's always more stuff to fix on this thing as well. So in this episode, a couple of things I want to get done. I've been having some issues with fuel leaks since I put the car together, and basically around some of the worm clamps that connect to some of the hard fuel lines, some of the filters, where the fuel pump is, it's just starting to leak. And I think I figured out what the problem is. Basically, I'm using a braided fuel line, which is quite stiff, and they're really difficult to bend around tight radius corners. They tend to open up around the flange, and because the system is pressurized so much, it's just squirting fuel out of the system. So in the engine bay where I had a leak, I had quite a sharp 90-degree turn. So what I actually did was take some fuel line, and instead of going to 90-degree one way, I went 270 degrees the other direction. And I'm also having a leak underneath the car right at the fuel pump. Same issue. I have to make quite a tight 90-degree bend, but I don't have the real estate to make a full 270 degrees in one direction. So I picked up some nylon barbed fittings that I am gonna swap out that tight radius for one of those. Hopefully that fixes that. You'll see as well here I have a reducer male-to-male straight. That should fix that union on that coolant hose that blew off on the way back from the Bag Riders block party at the Woolscott weekend. And yeah, if you watched the last episode, you will have seen I was having some issues with the temperature gauge. I think the temperature gauge is bad. And I thought I was going to put in some aftermarket gauges in that block off panel where the radio goes. I think I've since changed that plan. I want to keep this build kind of looking as original as possible. So I may still put a radio back in this. I need to figure out an aftermarket tack or rev counter. But I did find on eBay a new cluster, which has temperature gauge, clock, and the fuel gauge. So the fuel gauge was working, but the clock never worked and the temperature gauge didn't work. So I've obviously got some bad wiring going on back there, or both of those have failed. This gauge is confirmed as working. So my two tasks for this episode is to fix those fuel leaks and also replace that gauge cluster. And I did also find some more sadness on the car. You'll have seen a couple of episodes ago, I replaced this right front wheel hub because the wheel bearing was bad. I've probably only put 10 or 15 miles on the car since then, and that wheel bearing has gone bad again. I have playing it. I'll see if I can show you real quick. It's pretty bad, and that shouldn't be happening after only 10 or 15 miles at all. So there is clearly something going on, something not happy on this right front corner. So I need to dig into that. I have some ideas. I've thrown a few posts out on Facebook and some of the owners group. But if you've got any ideas about that, please let me know in the comments. Just so you guys know, I am running the S&P axles with the 100mm outers. I am running a Tech 53 axle spacer to fit the 90mm Mark 1 hubs. I did have to grind some material away from those spaces to make them fit. There's a small chance that's the issue, but I don't think it is. It could also be that I'm not torquing the axle bolt properly. So I'm gonna have a look at that as well. But if you do have any ideas, please drop me a comment. Let's get on with fixing these fuel leaks. Okay, it is not pretty and I am not happy with the extra hose clamps, but functionally it should be better than what was there before. You can see I've eliminated that tight 90-degree bend in the hose. Just wasn't liking that. The hose is too stiff and rigid with the braided hose, just causing the openings to oval a little bit, and then when sealing around the barb, now that I have that 90-degree fitting in there, all the hoses are running straight, nice and tight around the barbs, so hopefully no more leaks, should be good to go. So back on with the Rabbit project today after a few days off. Last weekend was the Euro-Built car show. Took the GTI down, got another first place and a best interior award, so that's pretty sweet. But that shows just as much about the community as it is about the cars, so always good to catch up with old friends and see some nice cars. But we are getting back on with the Rabbit today. I really want to get to the bottom of this right front axle and hub problem that I'm having. I've not driven this car in a couple of weeks and I really want to drive it. So I'm going to jump into that again today. I'm going to strip down that right front hub again. I'm not going to record it because you've seen me do it 2 times already before, but I think I know what's happening. I think that Tech 53 spacer is kind of pushing the hub out of the bearing and just causing the hub to have a little bit of play in it. So I'm going to strip that down, see what I can do. I might try and grind the hub. That's what most people do when they run these 100mm axles in the 90mm spindle. They just create some relief. You can put Cabriolet hubs on, but I was looking at the prices of those. I don't really want to drop $300 on a set of new spindles just yet. So I'm going to grind that hub, see if I can make it fit. And yeah, I will check in a little bit, show you the progress. Okay, let me show you where I'm at. This is gonna look a little confusing, so let me explain. This is the new axle that's still attached to the transmission with the 100mm outer. This is the Tech 53 spacer that goes on the end like so. And when I pulled the axle out of the hub, the bearing had play in it. So what I did was grab the old axle, put that in, snug it up, because that fits without the spacer because it has the 90mm outer. Snugged it up, and the play is gone out of the bearing. The hub is now nice and tight. So that's what is going on right here. You see I have the old axle in the hub with the nut, and there is no play of the hub between the hub and the spindle itself. So by process of elimination, what I need to do is get rid of that Tech 53 spacer. So that is going to require me to grind the back of the spindle. Why it's only happening on the passenger side or on the driver's side, I don't know. The driver's side is still the original spindle and bearing, so maybe the bearing is a slightly different design or they're just stronger. Yeah, so let's get on with grinding the back of this hub to make that 100mm axle fit. So hub removed, this lip right here is what I need to grind back. Just take this bevel off to kind of knock it on a 45 so that that slightly wide 100mm CV joint slots in. And so yeah, you go from 90mm to 100mm, so basically need to remove 5mm all the way around. So I just want to show you guys a close-up of the grinding I did on the back of the hub. You can see kind of the shiny chamfered edge on about 45 degree. That's the edge that I removed. I did a test fit and it seemed to fit pretty well first time, so I just cleaned it up a little bit more and then cleaned it out with some brake clean. But yeah, there you go. You don't have to remove that much material. So anyone looking to try this at home, that's pretty much what it should look like after you've ground the hub. And you can see when I test fit this on the axle, it's close, there's about 1mm of clearance, but I think that should do it. And I just replaced this with a 1/2 inch to 3/4 adapter. So hopefully that's not gonna blow off again. All right, so I just took this thing for a quick rip and it's running pretty good. No coolant leaks that I can see of, no fuel leaks that I can see of, and that right front wheel bearing seems to be nice and tight. So I have one more thing left to do this episode. That is swap out that clock and temperature gauge, see if I can get that working. And if I can get those working, I'm gonna be well chuffed. Okay, it is a new day. Let's see if we can get this cluster worked out, get the clock working again, and get the temperature gauge working. So this is the new clock and temp gauge that I purchased. Seller confirmed it worked, so I just need to get it swapped in. So a bit of a mishmash of parts going on right here. The fuel gauge and the temperature gauge is slightly different. They have this third kind of knob in the middle, and on the back of the cluster, the factory one, the one that came with the car, this one doesn't have that hole in the middle for that middle stud to come through. So I had to mix and match a little bit. I know that the fuel gauge on the cluster was working, so I transferred that one over to the new one I bought that the seller said the clock works and the temperature gauge works. I did put a multimeter across it and they were giving different readings, so hopefully it was a bad temperature gauge. So now I'm putting it back together with the circuit board from the original cluster. Hopefully that's good. With the clock that I bought, with the temperature gauge that I bought, but with the original fuel gauge. So let's put all this back together, see if we can get it to work. Okay, there we have all the gauges back together. Let's put these in the Rabbit, see if they work. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't seem to have solved the problem. I don't have the temperature gauge still, and the clock still does not work. So maybe there's something else going on with the wiring on the back of the dash. Maybe it's that kind of weird printed circuit board. But yeah, plan B, you need to dig into this just a little bit more. Well, I've spent all day trying to get this temp gauge and clock to work, and I am unsuccessful. I've been poking around under the dash, trying to figure out the wiring. I think I had the sender wire from the temp sensor on the engine to the cluster wired up to the wrong wire. So I swapped that out, still didn't work. And then the old gauges that I pulled out, the ones that came with the car, I just put 12 volts across those and the temperature gauge works. And also the clock started spinning too. So I know that the gauges that I had originally came with the car do work. So definitely something wrong with the wiring under the dash. And just to top things off, I think the thermostat is sticking closed. The top radiator hose gets hot, the bottom one is staying cold. So not much more I can do today, unfortunately. I'm gonna have to end this one on a slightly sad note, but join me next time. Let's see if we can figure it out.